Game over, man. Game over. Squid Game has returned for one final chapter. Well, maybe not, but we'll get to that. Picking up where Season 2 left off, Ji-hoon is returned to the masochistic games after a failed attempt at rebellion, forced to continue playing once the guards make it clear they won't let him take the easy way out. When this final chapter begins, Ji-hoon is a broken man, the darkest version of the character yet, for the first time in the series, actively trying to win one of the games by killing another player. Even the aesthetic of the show, which has always been one of my favorite parts, is less colorful and visually compelling than before, sacrificing one of its strongest elements for the dark, depressing tone of the final chapter. In a twisted take on hide and go seek, players are split into teams with one team doing their best to hide and escape the other team, who seeks them out. The twist? Seekers are armed with knives straight out of Final Fantasy and must kill a hiding player in order to advance. This gives Ji-hoon the perfect opportunity to take out some of that rage he's still holding in after his failed attempt to stop the games. Especially after the introduction of voting to continue between rounds, there's a clear distinction between the players that just want to live and those that are finding sick enjoyment in it all. By immediately placing Ji-hoon in a gray area between the two, the stage is set for philosophical conflict. Will he find a way to save those that have tried to vote themselves out round after round, or will he embrace the cold violence the games thrive on? How far are you willing to go to win is a question this series asks its protagonists time and time again, and when it comes to Ji-hoon, this applies not only to the games, but to dismantling them as well. While Ji-hoon is doing his best Michael Myers impression, our returning cast from Season 2 are just doing their best to survive. This season especially exemplifies the motif of sacrifice, with many dying in service of another. Hyun-ju, the transgender woman who is a former Special Forces soldier, kicks all kinds of ass, carrying on the rebellious spirit when Ji-hoon is at his most emotionally compromised. Her decision to protect rather than only play for herself predictably results in tragedy, reminding the audience quickly how expendable everyone in this show is. Squid Game has never shied away from extremely emotional stakes, and given that this is the final round of the games, expect the violence and the betrayals to be at their most devastating. For example, a mother and son are on opposing teams during hide and seek. That alone sets the stage for multiple outcomes, none of which are good, and the conclusion of that storyline was legitimately shocking, resulting in the most emotional scene this season has to offer. This season also has a much larger focus on Junhee, a pregnant woman, and Myung-ji, her baby daddy. She largely serves as a symbol of preservation, a player that deserves protection at all costs due to the innocent life growing within her. Unfortunately, she's not given much to do other than spreading her legs and pushing out a new player. Myung-ji, on the other hand, is given an arc that rivals some of the most comically villainous characters I've ever seen. By the end of the story, he's willing to put an end to any player that stands in his way of the 45.6 billion won at stake. Any player. As far as the rest of the antagonist side of the board goes, the roster is fairly milquetoast. There's a drug addict who really only serves to spend his time bullying another player, who ends up taking his drugs and becoming an addict himself. The idea of characters needing to abuse substances to deal with the incomparable stress of the situation is realistic, and I thought it had potential to go in an interesting direction. But both characters essentially just stay high until they're eliminated, not really offering much commentary on how desperation drives people to addiction. At least there are a few hallucination sequences that offer up something different visually for the show. I'm fine with these two just acting as a side story rivalry, but once one is gone, the other has absolutely nothing to do until they're eliminated as well. Nowhere near as satisfying as the kamikaze move pulled on the glass bridge in Season 1. We also have the old guy with lots, and I mean lots of debt. He's essentially the leader of Team Circle, but doesn't really have any dimension to his character other than really wanting to keep playing the game, and encouraging the rest of his team to do so. This brings me to the main villains of the entire series, the frontman, and to a lesser extent, the VIPs, both of which have the exact same problem. This far into the series, I mean it's the conclusion for fuck's sake, we should have a much better understanding as to who these people are and what the motivations are for their actions, but they seemingly have none other than a love of the game. I can almost accept the VIPs being nothing more than mustache-twirling villains if their dialogue wasn't so awful, but by the end, I was just praying they'd all be killed by a police force, the players, or even the pink guards. Whereas earlier I mentioned Myung-ji being comically evil, these degenerates take it to a whole other level, completely soulless husks who exist only to derive pleasure from sadism. They're so ridiculously evil that it takes me out of the show, resulting in the dreaded thought, that would never happen. Much more important, though, is the frontman, the face of the games who has ultimate control of this iteration. It's implied that he himself has somebody to answer to, running the show on behalf of an even more evil entity, but we're never shown who that is or why he's decided to perpetrate this heinous crime. You could argue that it's implied his cynical view of humanity is what drives him, believing every subsequent winner of the games is just like he was, ruthless and cold-blooded in pursuit of the final prize, driven by greed and self-preservation. He wants people to be as broken and selfish as him, and is doing his best to mold them in that image, even if they try to resist. In Season 2, when he joins in to play once again, he sees hope brewing amongst Ji-hoon and his comrades, promptly destroying a festering rebellion and reminding them what happens when you go out of your way for others. In Season 3, once Ji-hoon snaps out of his funk, he once again commits to proving to the frontman that there's more to life than blood sports, and humanity is capable of inspiring feats of selflessness. Their conflicting ideologies set the stage for an intense final confrontation. A confrontation that never comes. This is my main problem overall with the season. It's filled to the brim with missed opportunities. Not only does Ji-hoon not have an impactful final battle with the frontman, his brother spends 2 entire seasons tracking the island down, and when he finally arrives, he's far too late to do anything meaningful. The two don't even exchange words. Junho just goes into melodramatic soap opera mode, shouting, "Why?" out of pure frustration, a perfect representation of the audience at home. What was this all for? Why has the frontman done this? We'll never know, just like we'll never know who the greater powers are behind the games. No Yule, the pink guard we were introduced to in Season 2, serves as yet another investigator and rebellious force. And yet her plotline culminates in a boss fight with a character we barely know anything about, and the destruction of records that were going to end up being destroyed anyway. She does rescue a single player, who has a daughter, seeking redemption for abandoning her own daughter in the past. But I really wanted to see more from her, especially given her perspective. Introducing a character on the other side of the games that we can get invested in as the audience was a great idea. But in the end, she didn't make any discoveries that we didn't already know about. She's primarily used to reinforce the themes of parenthood and protecting the innocent, paralleling Ji-hoon's storyline during the final 2 games, which are essentially both just make it from point A to point B without falling into a giant pit. But this time, Ji-hoon is given a 7.5-pound handicap. After Junhee calls it quits due to a bum leg, Ji-hoon takes it upon himself to carry her child across the finish line. This becomes the most meaningful storyline in the latter half of the season, as most of our characters from Team X have already joined the mass grave of losers. A young babe represents the absolute antithesis of the frontman's beliefs about humanity, pure innocence untainted by corruption and selfish desires. Except ironically, this baby is a CGI abomination that represents the unchecked hubris of man. After surviving the games and defeating a villain more unhinged than Azula, the stage is set for a final moment of ultimate sacrifice for Ji-hoon, declaring his own thesis about humanity with one of the most memorable lines of dialogue in the show, followed by a death that feels earned, albeit predictable. I have mixed feelings about this sequence because on the one hand, I feel that it's very in character for both the character and the series as a whole. It seems like the series is saying that in order to defeat the game, which is to say overcome greed and competition, we must be willing to support one another and sacrifice, living a selfless existence of giving rather than taking. Ji-hoon did his best to give life to this world rather than take it, and it cost him everything. But he'd rather go down that path than become a ruthless, soulless killer like the frontman. But on the other hand, I feel like there should have been a clashing of all of our storylines, with Ji-hoon, Junho, No Yul, and the frontman all facing off before the games come to an end. I'll try not to go into complete fanfic mode here, but wouldn't it have been satisfying to see them debate philosophy in a final standoff? Maybe even playing one last game during the self destruct countdown of the island? The games add dramatic tension because any wrong move could be your last. But what's most interesting about this show is its dissection of human morality. We get a little bit of that from Jihoon in the end, but we should have seen No Yul be confronted about her choice to be a pink guard. Sure, she helped one player, but what about the many others she had to shoot to maintain her cover? The front man could have teased Jihoon about breaking down and killing somebody in the fourth game, goading him on to do the same to him, making him a winner even in death for breaking his rival's moral compass. And Junho could have had an actual fucking interaction with his own flesh and blood after 2 fucking seasons. Sorry, I got a bit heated there. The point is that the ending was decent, but it could have been better. The show still features solid performances across the board, except for the VIPs. But unfortunately, even the best of character storylines ended in a largely unsatisfying way. We get an epilogue where we see where the remaining characters are now, which is kind of sweet, but I don't care about them nearly as much as I should. Junho accomplished nothing, Noyul saved one random guy, and the front man is still out there being evil for evil's sake, I guess. Oh, and the games are still out there too. And one final drop of blood being squeezed from the proverbial stone, Galadriel shows up for no reason other than to tease an American spin-off series. I don't have a problem with the idea of a spin-off necessarily, other than an overall sense of franchise and brand fatigue I've been experiencing lately. But I do have a problem with using the final moments of your series to tease another show that more than likely won't even have the same creative team behind it. I get what they're going for by implying the games will never die and exist on a global scale, but I would have much rather this been achieved by the frontman going to some kind of Squid Game headquarters, establishing him as nothing more than middle management to a much larger machine when we see dozens, if not hundreds, of other frontmen. Sending in Kate Blanchett for the final scene is just distracting, signaling to the audience that there's going to be more with stars you know and love. All in all, Squid Game was a very entertaining and emotionally compelling series. The first season was definitely the best, with the following 2 taking on a lot of typical problems sequels have. In many ways, it's the same story again with some tweaks, attempting to increase the emotional stakes with mixed results. But when it hits, it really hits, and leaves you contemplating what you would do to not only survive, but to thrive in a harsh world. This final chapter asks one last time, how do you define humanity? After watching this, I can tell you that humans are. Squid Game 3 gets a CGI baby. Plus. Thank you so much for watching. Yeah, you specifically. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to give a like, comment, or subscribe to see more.